What's up, man? It's Saturday night. It's the first night this week that I haven't had anything going on. Just hanging out at home, quiet evening, enjoying some slightly mind-altering substances, and I'm here to make a video. And I've been messaging with some of you guys tonight too, talking to my Vancouver, Portland posse. Who the hell knew that I had a handful of you guys who are all like my neighbors? Hello, it's nice to meet you guys. Razmix1, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for watching. That's not somebody's name, is it? Yeah, I found out yesterday I can't say your names. Even if it's your YouTube handle, I can't say last names. So Razmix1, I'm guessing your last name is not Mix or One. I apologize if it is. If I use last names, YouTube will let the video stand, but they will disable comments. And I don't want that to be the case. So I always want comments to come in. And by the way, when I say I'm in the Portland area, that means that I'm in, if you're an old school Portlander, you know that if you live in Vancouver, you're in the Portland area. It's the same. It's all the same community. That's gotten lost recently, but it's hard to explain that to people who aren't from here. I'll give you guys a quick geography lesson and bore the hell out of you. The state of Washington and the state of Oregon is separated by the Columbia River. The Columbia River flows westerly into the Pacific Ocean. Excuse me. Vancouver, Washington is on the southernmost border of the state. Portland, Oregon is on the northernmost border of the state. Vancouver and Portland butt into each other. They are neighbors. There are two bridges that connect the states that go over the Columbia River. You spend a couple minutes crossing the bridge and you are in that state. Portland has four suburbs. It has Vancouver to the north, it has Gresham to the east, it has Milwaukee to the south, and Clackamas a little bit. Clackamas and Milwaukee are kind of meld together there on the border. And then you have Beaverton to the west. And that's it. I'm in Vancouver. It's hard to explain that. Like, people, when you say Vancouver, Washington as a suburb of Portland, Oregon, it blows their minds because they're different states. And also there's Vancouver, Canada. So when you say you're from Vancouver, people automatically assume, oh, it's Canada. No, there's a Vancouver, Washington that's just north of Portland, Oregon. So yeah, when you're in Vancouver, you're part of the Portland community. It's all the same. The newbies don't get that. In fact, the new people that move to Portland are super snobbish about being in Portland. If you're anywhere outside Portland city limits, these new people who just moved here get super snobbish about it. It's interesting. That's just ignorance at work there, I think. People don't know. But you old school Portlanders, you know, we're all the same community. It's all the same. Anyway, I was sitting here chilling tonight, listening to some records, watching the baseball game, and it occurred to me that several people have asked me to do a top 10 video, like, what my top 10 records are. No, I will never do that, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I think it's kind of glib to do that. I love music. I take it a little more seriously than that. I mean, whatever. Top 10 lists are fine, but when you've listened to thousands of records like I have, it's not possible. Like, some days a certain album is my favorite. Some days another album is my favorite. It shifts, it's impossible. It's an impossible task for me to do. I will never do a top 10 list. I can't. I would leave something out and I would go nuts. I'm not ever going to do it. And also, if you want to know my favorite albums, just watch this channel. Not every record I talk about I would, put in my top 20 or even 50, but there are enough records out there that are interesting to me that I wish to talk about. But I've talked about plenty of my all-time favorite albums that could be on my top 10 list at any point in time, and one of which I'm going to talk about right now. But, 3 years ago, when I did my Weatherall video, there's 3 or 4 albums in there that could conceivably be in my top 10. It's a rotating, revolving list. One of them I'm going to talk about tonight, but yeah, it's watch my Weatherall video. And then watch my Brian Eno video. I did a Brian Eno video 3 years ago, and hardly anyone's watched that. There are 2 or 3 albums in that list that would easily be, at any point, could be in my top 10. You know, Apollo, Brian Eno Apollo, absolutely one of my all-time favorites. The album he did with David Byrne, Everything That Happens Will Happen Today, absolutely beautiful record. Totally could be in my top 10 any time. It's a revolving list. Ministry, The Land of Rape and Honey, Happy Mondays, Pills and Thrills and Bellyaches, Skinny Puppy, Rabies. These are all some of my, given the day and given my mood, those could be in my top 10 easily. There are a number of videos that I've done where you could say, oh yeah, there's, Aphex Twin, Selected Ambient Works. Absolutely one of my favorite albums. I did an Autechre video a few years ago. I don't know did I talk about Incunabula? I don't know if Incunabula was in my Autechre video, but that's absolutely one of my favorites. So if you're wondering what my top 10 is, just watch my videos. I mean, honestly, a lot of these records I talk about are record 1999 Prince. Absolutely one of my favorites. Meat Beat Manifesto, Subliminal Sandwich. KLF, Chill Out. I thought I was pretty clear. I just did that video a few weeks ago. I thought I was pretty damn clear that is one of the most beautiful records I've ever heard. Anyway, I'm never doing a top 10 list. My top 10 list is sprinkled all around my channel. So there's your top 10 list. Today I was listening to a couple of Stone Cold classics. I know I've been hammering the industrial music lately, and I love industrial, but honestly, I like electronic music more. It's more, I feel more strongly about electronic dance music, however you want to coin that. Sorry if I'm a little scattered right now. My brain's altered, all right? But sit back and enjoy. You never know what will come out of my mouth. I was listening to this earlier. This isn't the album I want to talk about, but I think I'm going to make a video about this soon. Sorry for the glare. Well, I'll talk about this later. This is Aphex. I care because you do. This has some cool stuff with it. Like there's a bag in here and a poster. I don't think people see that normally. Like this is like a special limited edition that came out when it first was released. I think people will enjoy this. This is the album I always point Aphex Twin, like when people are trying to get into Aphex Twin or they don't know much about him. This over the years, this is always the album I point them to because I always felt this is the album that Aphex. This is the album where all of his styles come into play. Most of his albums are kind of it's either ambient or techno or whatever the fuck. This has all of it. This has ambient and acid and breakbeat and drum and bass and all of that shit. It's all mashed into one here. This is a good example of everything Aphex did and does in a nice way. And I just got his new record shipped from Bleep. He has a new 12-inch out. I'm super excited to hear that. Anyway, I'll do a video on this. This isn't what I plan on talking about, but I was listening to this earlier. And yeah, this is a fun release. It's got a poster and a bag and all kinds of stuff like that. So, yeah. But tonight, I'm talking about this. And I already held this up in my Weatherall video. But this deserves a video all on its own. Two Lone Swordsmen, the 5th mission. And I'm not going to show the EPs that came out around here, the 3rd mission and the 10th mission. They're awesome records. The 12-inch version of Rico's Heli is one of the finest moments in dance music in history, as far as I'm concerned. I'll send a link to that in this video. I hope you guys are checking the links too. Read my description of my videos. When everything drops down, you'll see some links in there. Check those out. I try to link to stuff that I talk about. But you want one of my all-time favorites. This album is absolutely in my top 10. The Fifth Mission, Return to the Flightpath Estate. This is Andy Weatherall's best album, I think. And he did this with Keith Tenniswood, of course. It's Two Lone Swordsmen. It's not just him. But this is some of the most heart-wrenching, emotional electronic music I've ever heard. Right up there with Brian Eno. Those of you who accuse electronic and instrumental electronic music of not having any soul or emotion, I point you to this album. This album just means so much to me. It came out in 1996. So, it's what, 27 years ago? I've been listening to this for 27 years and it just never, ever, ever, ever gets old. It's such a beautiful album. It's a triple record. And there are actually a couple of extra songs on the CD. This is a double CD album. There are a few songs on there that weren't on here. Makes me very irritated. I ended up getting the CD. This is also on Apple Music. This is one of the reasons too I'm ripping all my vinyl, because Apple Music is such a steal, and I want to record my records so I can have my own digital copy, so I can record them the way I want to. But then I ship these out. I sell a lot of these because I'm getting to a point in my life where I don't want to be buried by records. At this point, someone's going to find me dead in my home, buried under a pile of records because they fell on me. My hand will be hanging out of a pile of old Jungle 12 inches with a couple of old industrial records crammed up my ass. Oh, he lived an interesting life, buried in records. Yeah, I recorded this tonight. It was fun. I love revisiting this album. This album just takes me back to such a vibrant time. 1996, god damn, man. I mean, if you were paying attention or you're old enough to be buying electronic music, I mean, good lord. The 90s, it was insane. It was dizzying. There were so many great releases that came out in the 90s, electronic wise. I mean, I can't think of a better decade for music, honestly. The 70s is close. For me, I grew up in the 90s, so the 90s was a stunning time for electronic music. It just was, yeah, it was like an explosion of creativity that lasted an entire decade. A mushroom cloud that just continued to spread its plumes all over the earth for 10 straight years. And this is one of the greatest right here. You want one of the best pure electronic albums that's ever been made? Look no further, man, honestly. And this isn't exactly what you would expect from Andy Weatherall. My favorite phase of Weatherall's career is right here. The stuff he did with Keith Tenniswood right after he left the Sabres, right after Sabres of Paradise, that was like in late 95. He hooked up with Keith Tenniswood, and they were Two Lone Swordsmen for about a decade. But everything these guys did between 90, the end of 95 until through like 99, amazing. They had this really unique sound. My favorite records from those guys tend to be the stuff they put out on their own label, Emissions here, like Stockwell Steppas, Swimming Not Skimming, that stuff. And their remixing, the remix they did for Spiritualized, one of my favorites. The remix they did for Ganger, remember that one? Just killer stuff, man. These guys were on a serious, scary roll. Even for Weatherall, I think he and Tenniswood were just such a good combo. Tenniswood's still around, by the way. He pretty much just makes electro. I think he was always kind of an electro head, but you wouldn't know it by listening to this. Yeah, this phase is like it's filled with music that was very unusual for both Weatherall and Tenniswood. They just kind of made a bunch of music that isn't like anything else they ever did. This album is like it's super lo-fi, which we don't really, when it comes to Tenniswood and Weatherall, we don't think of them being lo-fi. But this is a pretty lo-fi, low-key, almost jazzy album. And the electronics are it's mainly down tempo, but when it's up tempo, it's still very. They almost sound like demos. And not that they're unfinished ideas. I'm just talking about the recordings themselves. It's I don't want to use the word primitive, but it sounds it's in relation to Weatherall and Tenniswood's other work. It is primitive, but they do it on purpose. You can hear it. It's not something they put this out in '96. I mean, Weatherall was already known to be a super technical, ahead of his time producer, but then he kind of took a step back from that sound and did this. It's not really dance music. There are some dance elements on here, but if I had to use if I had to describe this, I would actually say it sounds a little jazzy, but in that electronic dance music world. But really, what pulls these songs together are the melodies. I mean, there is some heart wrenching stuff on here. Unbelievable album. I mean, from start to finish, too. It's yeah, three albums worth, and they're not long. I would say there's probably 15 minutes of music on each side. But by the time when the first song starts, it's kind of like almost like it sounds like a car engine's trying to start in the cold, like an old car sputtering to a start, and you got to keep restarting it and turning the key over and trying to fire the ignition over and over. It's got that kind of grind to it, and that's not a slight, but that's how it starts. It's almost like it takes a while for it to get moving, and then it gets moving, and then like you're 20 minutes into the record, and you're lost. You just get lost in this album. It builds every song. It's masterfully done. It literally, like, the first song is like probably the most minimal song on there. And by the time you get to the last song, Paisley Dark, you're in tears. Paisley Dark is one of the greatest songs Weatherall ever did. Heartbreaking melody. Like, it's hard to describe the drum sound and just the drum programming in general. I I almost interviewed Andy Weatherall when I worked for Discogs, and he died before I could get to it, and I will always regret it. I wanted to ask him specifically about this. I was so excited. I mean, just to meet him anyway, obviously, would have been a high point of my life. But I had planned. I had a whole agenda, man. I was going to talk to him about this. It's got such an arc to it. To me, those are the best kind of albums. The records where they start, it's almost like a primordial ooze coming out of the water, and it's just forming and fizzing. It's turning into something that you don't know yet, and then it starts evolving and taking shape, and these melodies come in, and it takes you on a different journey, and then all of a sudden you're over here in this space, and then it raises you up to the clouds, and you're floating, and then the last song comes in and washes over you, and your heart breaks. That I'm describing an electronic album too. There are no lyrics here. A lot of people seem to think you can only reach an apex of emotion if you're singing, but no, this disproves that theory. Just a stunning album. If you've never heard this, do me a favor, man. Go listen to this. And I think it's on Apple Music. You can go stream it. It's not hard to find. And you get two more tracks too that are not on this record. I mean, I could break down these tracks. I mean, Little Did We Know, The Best of Stealth. My favorite tracks on here, like I said, Paisley Dark. My God, ah, Beautiful song. Arguably Weatherall's best song. Just an emotional roller coaster of a track. Beautiful way to end it. It really does evolve. It's just, it's minimal. It's gaining steam. Holy shit, what am I doing? Where am I? And now I'm in the clouds. I'm floating around. I'm feeling amazing. Now my heart is starting to break, and oh shit, that's the end. Just kind of like a microcosm of life in a lot of ways. Ups and downs, twists and turns, joy and pain. It's all here. I don't know what Weatherall was going through when he made this and Tenniswood. I don't want to discredit Keith Tenniswood. He's an amazing producer. You should check him out too. Radioactive Man. Oh my god. The first Radioactive Man album. Holy shit, y'all. It came out on Rodders Golf Club, which was Weatherall's label. The first Radioactive Man album. Stunning. Absolutely one of the best electronic albums you'll ever hear. Bar none, man. But if you've never, if you think you're a Weatherall fan and you haven't bothered listening to this, open your mind and check this out. It's not the typical Weatherall. There's no four to the floor dance goodness here. I mean, there's a little bit. Rico's Heli has a little bit of that, but it's very subdued. It's not exactly a dance track. It does have that four to the floor vibe to it, but the 12-inch version of Rico's Heli is something special. That's more of a club track. This one's, yeah, it's more quiet. It's more in the background, Still got that energy, but it's not as fat as the 12-inch version. Two barb quick steps. Some of this is really funky too. Weird electronic funk and sturdy. The funk you hear on this record is made of concrete, man. It's unbreakable. It's just solid. God damn, this is a good album. Seriously, guys, listen to this. Listen to this album. Do me a favor. Check this out. Here are the labels. This is record 1. Good old Weatherall. I miss him, man. I mean, I missed him. I missed him the minute I found out he died. But that was when David Bowie and Prince died. That was upsetting, and a lot of people were upset. But for me, it was Weatherall. That's the one I really felt. I was like, oh my god, brutal. Record 3. Yeah, Weatherall's best album, hands down. If we're only looking at albums, I mean, he had plenty of 12 inches, and even his remixes. Some of his remixes were so epic and unique, they just turned into Weatherall tracks. That was the thing about him that was so fascinating, is that Weatherall, he took you on a journey. Every time he made a song, whether it was his own or whether it was a remix, he took you on a journey. Yeah, I just wanted to share this with you tonight. I was listening to this and feeling very strongly about it. Another cat behind me. He feels strongly about it too, right, Louis? Louis feels very strongly about this, and he should. It was his first time hearing it. He's weeping behind me. Actually, he's probably pissing all over my couch. I'll find out as soon as I click off here. Stunning piece of work. I always say it, but if you like my channel and you respect what I say, and I know a lot of you are industrial people, I get it and I love you, and I'm glad you're here. Listen to this, though. There's nothing industrial about this. Not a damn thing. It's just a beautiful electronic record. Well, that's what industrial music is, by the way. It's electronic music. And that's what I love. Music that's forward thinking and embraces technology, but does it in a very human and warm way. It doesn't get any better than this when you think of that concept. Good night. Have a good night. Thank you so much. Bye.